Hello and welcome to the Nantucket edition of Your Creative Midlife. I'm Betsy Bush. Here on Nantucket, I'm learning that many people fill many different roles on island, especially during the busy summer season. Today, I'm talking to someone who, over the span of years, has reinvented himself several times and now plays a special role in the cultural life of Nantucket all year round. Charley Walters has been an island resident since 1971. In those early days, he owned 2 record stores and wrote album reviews for Rolling Stone magazine. He's recorded interview shows for Nantucket Community Television, where we're recording right now, and produced a short film on an aspect of Nantucket history that you can see on YouTube. Now Charley has a jazz and blues show on WACK 97.7 FM. He's also deeply involved with Dreamland, the island's movie theater and cultural performance space. If you're looking for new directions in midlife or retirement, Charley's story might give you some ideas. Charley, thanks so much for joining me today. How did you come to Nantucket, and what did you think you were going to do when you got here?
My ambitions were, number one, get out of Boston, because I'd grown up there, Cambridge actually, and I was just sick of it. I couldn't stand it anymore. And I'd come to Nantucket summers, and I'd spent some time here in the off-season, so I knew what it was like. And I liked the peace and quiet, the pace, although I hasten to add that in 1971 there were 3,000 people living here year-round, and today there are, I'm told, in excess of 23,000.
Oh, okay. So
not so much peace and quiet anymore, but here I am.
Well, as someone who's visited off season, it does seem very deserted. I don't know where people are, but it's nice to be able to get a parking space in town.
Yes.
You know? So you had. You're kind of known as a rock expert, rock music expert, and you wrote Rolling Stone reviews, album reviews. Tell me how you got started in the music area.
When I was a teenager, I was a Beatle maniac. Starting in 1964 when they first had American Records Act.
Sure.
And I got to see them twice. I bought all their records, and that led to other groups playing similar kinds of music. And I was in a band in high school. So when I came here in 71, there actually was not a real record store as such. There were a couple of stores that sold records, but they also sold other things. So when someone opened a store, I applied for a job, and they said, fine, come on in. So I managed the store for, I guess, 8 years. And that was when I was writing for Rolling Stone. And at that time, I had been reading the magazine for a number of years, and I thought, well, if these guys can write this, I can do it too. Mm-hmm. And I knew a Boston Globe columnist named George Fraser, and he put me in touch with John Landau, who at the time was the Rolling Stone record review editor. He, after that, went on to produce Bruce Springsteen and I think manage Bruce Springsteen. But that's how it started. I knew someone who could refer me to the right person, and it took off from there.
Wow! So you were seeing your work in print, your byline, and that sort of thing. Why didn't that go any further as far as being a journalist, a music journalist go?
Well, at that time, if you wanted to be a journalist, there was no such thing as being an online journalist. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted to be a journalist of any import, that almost certainly meant moving to New York City. I wouldn't move to New York City. I mean, it's a great place, but it was not for me.
Right.
So I was content to write reviews for Rolling Stone. I also did reviews for the Boston Phoenix, which is now defunct, but mm-hmm. it was Boston's answer to the Village Voice. And there are a couple other publications, Circus Magazine, The Inquirer Mirror I wrote for one summer. I contributed to a couple of Rolling Stone books that were collections of album reviews, but I did that for 5 or 6 years.
You're still known today on island as the record guy. What's that like? I mean, when was the last time you sold records, or when did the store close?
Actually, the last time I sold a record was yesterday because I'm selling off my private collection. I'm sorry, what was the question
I'm
again?
sorry. When did you stop selling records?
When did I stop selling? Okay.
Yeah.
I closed the store in 2006, which is also the same year Tower Records closed. The whole industry was being turned upside down at that point. And that last year was the only year I didn't turn a profit in the store. And through a lucky coincidence, it was also the year my lease ended on my store space, so I shut it down.
You know, I think about magazines going out of print and newspapers going out of print, record stores changing. It means that a lot of us have had to find, to reinvent ourselves. And I'm wondering how you might see that that sort of development affecting you.
Well, I still wanted to have something to do with music aside from just listening to it. And two things happened, actually. About 10 or 12 years ago, WACK, one of the radio stations here in town, put out an announcement saying, if you have an idea for a radio show, let us know. So I went to them and I said, I know all about music and nothing about radio. Can you use me? And we went back and forth for a few months, and we ended up with me doing a jazz and blues show, which is still on the air once a week.
That's great.
I got to choose the music. I do write the copy, and I'm the guy who is reading my copy as it gets taped. So that was one way to stay with the music. Also, this is something I've done 7 times, I guess, over the last 10 years. I've taught courses, for lack of a better description, at the Nantucket Athenaeum, having something to do with one aspect of music or another. Mostly rock music of one stripe or another, but I've done that. They're month-long courses that I've done.
Month-long courses, how many times do you meet?
It's 4 times. It's not every day. It's once a week for 4 weeks, classes, or maybe an hour and a half. And I would have music, and I would have slides, and I've done that as well. Hope to do more in the future.
That's great. I mean, there's so much happening on Nantucket. When I look at all the different things to do, I'm like, I don't have time for everything that's on offer, and I find that really interesting for such a small community. But it's a community of really interesting people.
It is remarkable. It does attract people who have knowledge and experience and want to share that one way or another. And since the population has been increasing so much over the last 50 years, more and more people are here wanting to do more and more things.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me to be a place where if you're a creative person, there's so much to do and there's so many resources. I'm thinking about the visual arts. We have 2 art schools, the Artists Association and the Nantucket Island School of Design and Art. We have the Community Music Center. There are various theater groups. There's writing, filmmaking. What do you account for? Can you explain, or do you have an idea why that is happening? Why Nantucket? Why so many creative people are here?
It attracts creative people. I guess that's begging the question to say that. Mm-hmm. I think its geographic and architectural attractions have a lot to do with it. And this is just a pleasant place to do nothing in, if that's what you desire to do.
Right.
It's beautiful. It is quiet in the off season, although not nearly as quiet as it used to be. But if you want to hear yourself think and you want to write or paint or take photographs, whatever it happens to be, even though there's so many things going on, there are fewer distractions here than there would be in a city.
I'm wondering, with what you're describing, and we know there are a lot of artists here, is there an artist community? I mean, do people meet up at a pub and, is there an exchange of views or thoughts? Or I'm trying to think, is it like Paris in the 20s? Or New York in the 50s?
On a limited scale, I would say yes. The town has gotten big enough that it's hard for groups to break off the way they might have 50 years ago. And when you talk about the Nantucket community, to me, it's many, many micro communities. I mean, it's gotten so big that you can't have everybody in the same community. I mean, there are writers or there are painters, or as you say, and they will gravitate towards one another. But as for a community, I think those days are gone.
Mm-hmm. But was there at one time, did everyone, hang out at the Brotherhood or something like that in the off season and shoot the breeze?
Yes,
right?
They did. Although whether it was an artist community of one kind or another, I don't know about that. In the early 70s, there was a counterculture, for lack of a better word, and they would tend to gravitate towards each other. But within that group, you might have a painter or a woodworker or a writer or a non-artist, but they would gravitate towards each other because they were different from what at the time was the mainstream kind of person on Nantucket.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about what you're doing at Dreamland. And I'm not sure how many people know the scope of what Dreamland does. And you are on the board, as I understand.
Yes.
And you're doing some programming there. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about Dreamland. I know everyone who visits Nantucket passes the outside. But I think the programming and the activities there are really a lot more substantial than people might imagine.
They are substantial. And let me start by going back 50 years and saying what it was like back then, back when there were fewer people here. There were movies every night in the summertime, but there was one movie being shown. That movie would be here for 2 nights maximum. In most cases, they'd be here for 1 night. Tickets were 95 cents. That 5 cents and change went into the candy machine in the lobby, because candy really did cost 5 cents back in those days. In the wintertime, which was 9 months, there were no shoulder seasons back then. In the wintertime, there would be one movie on Saturday night. It was a movie you probably had not heard of and probably didn't want to see. Mm-hmm. In the early 70s, they decided not to be open year-round because it was getting too expensive to heat. But that's all that was going on in the theater.
Wow, okay.
Now, fast forward to today, or actually any time within the last 10 years, you have multiple movies going day and night, not just night the way it used to be, day and night, all year long. You have stage performances, you have concerts, you have interviews, conversations. There's all sorts of stuff going on all the time. This, despite the fact that Hollywood produces far fewer movies than they used to. Mm-hmm. In the old days, when movies changed almost every night, that's because there were plenty of movies out there that a theater could show. It's not as true now. And Hollywood also makes it difficult for smaller theaters to show some movies, because the studio might say, well, sure, you can show this movie, but you have to show it every night for 2 weeks, and you can't show anything else on that screen during those 2 weeks. And, oh, by the way, we're going to take 55, 60, 65% of your ticket sales.
Oh.
A lot of movies, small movie theaters, can't do that. Right. So every year there are films that don't come to the Dreamland because the Dreamland would be losing money showing them. That said, we show an awful lot of movies in the Dreamland.
Well, there are lots of independent movies, right?
There are a lot of independent movies, and that's what we try to do in Film for Thought, which I'm involved in there. Film for Thought is every Wednesday night, year-round. We show a movie once. I co-program it with Josh Gray, who is the overall director of creative programming at the Dreamland. Mm-hmm. And we look for documentaries, we look for foreign films, we look for independent movies. We have a steady audience, a lot of whom are there every Wednesday night, regardless of what the movie is. They have a different demographic from the normal demographic in the movie business, and we try to tailor it to that demographic.
And what is that demographic?
It's an older demographic, shall we say. It's men and women. Mm-hmm. But let's say it's, 50 and above. And we know what they want to see. I mean, I'm part of that demographic, so I know what I want to see, and I know what the people in the audience will want to see. But they're not all that age. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are a lot younger than that. But predominantly, we aim things at this older audience.
Well, as someone who is aiming a podcast at an older audience, I think it's not something to be don't want to say ashamed of or whatever or dismissive of, because we're all aware of the new longevity, as they're calling it. There's a demographic kind of boom in the 65 and older crowd. And I don't think we should be apologetic in finding things that appeal to this age demographic. So thank you very much.
Well, being part of that demographic, I couldn't agree more.
Right.
But to go back to what you were saying earlier, it's the kind of person who is living on Nantucket is more likely to be interested in a foreign film or a documentary or an independent film, as opposed to what the mainstream audience across the United States would be interested in seeing. It's a moving target. It always is. It always will be. And at Film for Thought, just for one example, we have to keep that in mind. What our audience might like this year, they may not have the same interest for it a year from now. And we have to be aware of that. And if we take a chance on a title, which we do from time to time, if it's drawing more people than we thought, they might think, well, what else can we get that might appeal to the people who liked this movie that we weren't quite so sure about when we booked it?
Interesting. Is there a discussion afterwards or a Q&A?
We do that. We've been doing that for the last year or so, and it's an audience discussion. I moderate it. I try to do as little talking as possible because it is supposed to be an audience discussion. Most people stay around. Most people, I would say 80 or 90% of the audience will stay around. Mm-hmm. Most of them want to listen rather than talk, but that's fine. You don't have to talk if you come. And we've done pretty well. They last maybe 15 minutes, and it's a popular sidelight, so to speak, of what the Dreamland programming is all about.
Are you surprised by that kind of reaction, or are the comments surprising in the angles or the takes people have on what they've seen?
A lot of the times, and this has happened considerably more than once, we will get somebody in the audience who has something to say that we hadn't expected and could not have anticipated. Mm-hmm. For example, in fact, I'll give you a few examples. We showed the movie My Left Foot, starring Daniel Day-Lewis.
Wonderful film. Yeah.
As part of another series of based on screenplays, best screenplays of this century. And when the movie was over, two women who were not together, raised their hands and said, well, I'm from Dublin, where this movie was filmed. One of them grew up in the same neighborhood in Dublin where the film was made. And, who knew? Who knew that was going to happen? We showed a documentary about boarding schools in Canada for First Nations people. That's their equivalent of Native Americans in Canada. And one of the women in the audience had lived in that same part of Canada and knew exactly what the film was about and knew the details. It was news in her community when she was living there.
Wow.
We showed Parasite, which is a Korean movie, and there was a woman in the audience who had lived in Korea and had a lot of things to say about the way the Koreans spoke in the movie. How some Koreans spoke one way, others spoke another way.
Which would have been lost to your average American audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just last week, we showed a movie called Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight, which is based on an autobiography of a woman who grew up in Zimbabwe. That movie was recommended to us, and a lot of the discussion centered around a woman who had grown up in Zimbabwe at the time this autobiography was set. So it was a whole range of things she could talk about firsthand. that we wouldn't have known about otherwise.
Wow.
And that sort of thing happens a lot more often than you might think. You never know who's going to be in the audience till they raise their hand and say, oh, by the way, let me say this. And it's wonderful when that happens.
I bet. I'm interested that series is a year-round series.
Yes.
So many things on Nantucket, when I say how busy things are, most things roll up their tent after Labor Day and they go away. But yours stays year-round, and I'm wondering what you think how you see your role in the community as a year-round resident, serving the year-round community, which is very different, or can be very different from the summer community.
It is very different from the summer community, but a lot of this just goes back to numbers. As I said a while ago, the population was 3,000 year-round in 1971. The summer population was 20, maybe 25,000. We've now gotten to a point where Nantucket's year-round population is the same number that the summer population used to be just 50 years ago.
Wow.
So if you have, let's say, well, as has been quoted to me, upwards of 23,000 people. That's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's just one movie in town, one movie theater in town, you have a built-in audience to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where that extent stops is where people sit at home and stream TVs on their small screen. And I'm a big proponent of watch the movie on a big screen in a dark room. It's a completely different experience.
We've talked a lot about, my podcast is a lot about reinvention in midlife. And I'm wondering what you think of this idea of the media gatekeepers are gone. You know music, you know film. The technology has gotten so much cheaper. It's easier to access. It's easier. Easier to make a movie. You can make a record album, or what we used to call a record album. Get it out there on social media. I'm wondering if you think this is a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, it's both. As I said to you before, if anybody can make a record or make a movie, whatever you're thinking of, then anybody will make a movie. They'll make an album. And to a certain point, that's great. Money is not the hindrance it used to be. On the other hand, who has time to listen to it all? And how do you separate the great stuff from the not so great stuff? And who has that much time to invest in it in the first place? Because we're all working and trying to make a living and support our families. It's good and bad. The opportunities are there for the producing artists, but for the consumer, it's just a constant avalanche of things that demand your attention, and of course you're going to miss things.
Yeah, as someone who's producing a podcast, I know how hard it is to get people's attention now that we're in an attention economy, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's all how many eyeballs or ears can you get is really what counts. I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone who's listening to this and thinking, I really would love to move to Nantucket and try to make a go, get involved in the creative scene and visual arts, writing, music, filmmaking. And I want to give NCTV here a plug because there are a lot of creative things you can do here. You can record a podcast, or they're sponsoring the Nantucket Shorts Film Festival. So make a 10-minute movie and submit it. I think it's really great, and I'm so impressed with the resources that are here in the community. For someone who's like, why don't I give Nantucket a try? What would you say?
It's a great place to start. You may not want to stay here, and that's fine. If you're really serious, really ambitious, this is not the end point. This is just the beginning point. But where are you going to live, and how are you going to pay for it? And I hate to inject economics into an artistic discussion, but if you don't have a place to live, you're going to knock yourself out just to pay the rent. And if that's what your life is, how much of your artistic work are you going to get done? But as far as a place to come to and have doors open to you, I'm testament to that. I mean, we're sitting here at NCTV right now, and I wanted to do a short documentary a couple of years ago. They said, fine, we'd love to have you do it. We'll pay you to do it. You can produce it. I'd never produced anything in my life. Now, was it Hollywood standards? No, but that's not the point. The point is I got to do it. It's been on YouTube. A lot of people have watched it. And had I been still living in Cambridge, this would probably not have happened.
Why don't you give it a plug? Tell us what it is so more people can download it.
Thank you, Betsy. If you go to YouTube and type in Untold Nantucket, I think it's the only Untold Nantucket thing on YouTube. And it's called the Nantucket Ditch, and it's about the Nantucket Ditch, which connects Long Pond to Hither Creek. And what initially fascinated me about it was dug out by hand by English settlers working with Wampanoag Indians in 1665. This is the oldest man-made structure still standing on Nantucket.
It's very interesting. I don't know that part of the island very well, but the drone footage showing the ditch wending its way, connecting the two. It's connecting the two ponds to the connecting the two ponds.
Well, the pond to Hither Creek,
right,
which joins Nantucket Harbor, which joins Nantucket Sound, et cetera.
And it permits the flow of ocean water into the water system, bringing in fish and.
It was a way to fish more successfully. Yeah, that was the idea behind it, because eels and alewives will go back and forth in the ditch.
It was a really interesting part of Nantucket history, which is always interesting, always fascinating. But so is what is happening now on Nantucket. And Charley Walters, I appreciate your being with me today on the Nantucket edition of Your Creative Midlife. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy. I enjoyed doing this.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and catch up with us and all our episodes on our website, yourcreativemidlife.com.